So, hello, number 3 video in the series or little sequence dealing with differentiation, which is how we help all of our learners, the advanced learners, the middle learners, the struggling learners, to get to a common goal relative to themselves. So today I want to talk about learners being stuck, often struggling learners. If you're stuck, by definition, you are struggling with something, but not necessarily always the struggling learners or the learners at the lower end of the language ability spectrum in a class, because we all get stuck from time to time. I mean, if you can think back to your own school days, I don't know if you remember what it's like to be stuck. I remember particularly in mathematics lessons, not knowing how to proceed with a calculation, with a sum, whether it was long division or algebra or fractions, and there being sometimes a long line of students waiting to see the teacher to get unstuck. I think sometimes when you have, I see stuck students almost like the cars in a apocalyptic series, sort of anything like The Walking Dead or 28, I don't know, hours, months, weeks, years later, whatever it is. Stuff like that, where you've got the abandoned cars kind of all sort of just where they were when the owners abandoned them, stalled along the intersections and the highways and the ring roads, stuff like that. That's the learners. They've stalled. They've got stuck and they need somebody to unstuck them, somebody to dig them out of the mud, as it were. What I did a few years ago was I sat down and I thought, okay, I want to understand this process a little bit more. So I sat down and I for each different language area, be it listening, vocabulary exercises, grammar exercises, speaking, reading, I wrote down all the different ways I thought a learner might be stuck, reasons for being stuck. Because I think if we want to help students who are stuck, we need to understand why they're stuck in the first place. So I created a document. It's a little bit dry, but I think it's an interesting document. For example, listening. If we ask ourselves, why might a student be stuck on a listening test? Well, sure, they might not understand anything that the speaker's saying. That's one possibility. The speaker might be speaking too fast. The speaker might be using words they don't recognise. It might be that the speaker is speaking in an accent that's thrown them off, is unfamiliar to them. It might be that they do understand most of the words, but they don't understand the key words that correspond to the questions they're being asked to answer. Or it might be that they're having problems processing the questions they've been given and the listening at the same time, because they've got the questions down here written and then they're trying to hear as well. That could be the problem. It could be that maybe they're looking at the wrong questions. They might be looking at the questions that correspond to a reading text on the next page. That there are, strange reasons or unexpected reasons why somebody might be stuck. They might simply be, they might have panicked themselves and just all they can hear is their own internalised sort of sub-vocalisations saying, you don't understand, it's going too fast. So they might be distracting themselves. Or they might have, a catchy song in their head and that's all they can think of. They might be trying to do a listening with the Macarena going through their head. There's all sorts of reasons. But there are reasons, and there will be a finite set of reasons, generally speaking, or working reasons, why students get stuck on a certain task. So what can we do? What can we do when a student is stuck? When they put up their hand and say, teacher, I don't know. Teacher, I'm stuck. Help. Well, for a start, I think the first thing we need to do is not panic. Students being stuck, students not knowing how to do something or needing our help is our bread and butter. And by that I mean it's the very stuff of which our teaching is comprised. Without students being stuck, we wouldn't have a job. if they understood everything we gave them and played them as an audio, showed them as a text, told them or asked them to do, if they understood all of that, then what will be the point of a teacher? So for a start, when a student says, I'm stuck, we don't or get frustrated or, ooh, you know, this is an obstacle to my lesson going well. It's not an obstacle to your lesson going well. It's actually the opportunity to make a good lesson, to shine. So that's the first thing. Second thing, when a student says I'm stuck, I mean, the tendency of teachers is to sort of reiterate what they've already said or jump in there without really having understood why the student is stuck. Let's imagine you've spent 5 minutes, 10 minutes doing a grammar presentation at the board on the future perfect, and you've written sentences like, by tomorrow afternoon I will have finished the project. And you've even done a timeline, you've done an arrow going to tomorrow, then you've drawn an eyeball looking back, you know, by tomorrow I will have finished. You've explained all this and you've got a student say, teacher, I don't understand. I don't understand. The tendency, and I've seen teachers do this, and I've done this myself, is just to reiterate what you've already said, but slightly more emphatically. And by the end of it, the student will be too intimidated or overwhelmed to say they still don't understand. And they go, oh, yeah. And then you think, okay, I've done my job now. But what you've done is you've just repeated what you did the first time. And if they didn't understand the first time, they probably don't understand the second time. You turn your back to do something else, and then another student will probably turn to them and tell them what the problem was for them. That's how it often works. I mean, let's imagine that's the situation. A student hasn't understood your presentation on the future perfect. With your example, by tomorrow we'll have finished the project, and by tomorrow we'll have finished this. Maybe if we stopped and said, okay, why don't you understand? And we took a few seconds to go into the headspace of that student, then we would have discovered that they've had a momentary sort of confusion and they got mixed up with tomorrow and yesterday. And it was that simple. And they were trying to make the whole thing work with the concept of yesterday. And it wasn't quite working for them, that's all, for example. I was sat in a class, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago now. Time marches inexorably on, doesn't it? I was watching a teacher, good teacher, go over, do a listening with a class. And the listening was about somebody who'd gone to live in a foreign country and how they felt. And at one point in the listening, they said they felt like the village idiot because they couldn't speak, they couldn't express themselves. Well, there was an Italian student there, young Italian lad, and when the teacher went over that question, she said, how did he feel? And he put his hand up and he said, he felt like Billy Elliot. And the teacher sort of looked at him and said, no, he didn't. And then sort of moved on. Now, obviously, I wasn't teaching the class. I was sat there relaxed, able to observe. But for me, this breakdown, this confusion was fascinating. And, you know, the teacher might have wondered, why did he say Billy Elliot? Billy Elliot was the main character of a film about a lad who grew up in a mining town who wanted to do dancing, by the way, if you haven't seen it. I like the film. The Village Idiot, Billy Elliot, the Village Idiot, Billy Elliot. It's so close. I was sitting there thinking, that's amazing. But what we really need to do is just enter into the headspace of that student who's become confused to find out why, and then have a look. So when a student says to you that they are stuck, I think that's the first thing. That's the first thing we want to do is try to enter into their headspace. Why are you stuck? Get a picture, the confused picture from the student's perspective, and that will help us to unstuck them, to dig them out. Because if we don't take the time to go into their headspace, if we just reiterate our explanations from our own perspective, most of the time we won't get there. Now, the other, one of my maxims is, if you ask somebody to do something with nothing, you create stress. And I'll say this time and time again, and I'm like a scratch record, and you hear me say it, but if you ask students to do a language task that is above their sort of linguistic ceiling, above their language level, and you don't provide them with any language support, then you create stress and they will be stuck. So in the next video, I'm going to look at, well, first of all, we'll look at how to prepare differentiated lessons in our heads, but also how to provide support for struggling learners so that they don't become stuck, or if they do become stuck, they can unstuck themselves. Right, until then, nice to be talking to you again. Strength and energy with your teaching.